on the program tonight, and I want to start right away. You remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about former Governor Don Siegelman from Alabama, who had been jailed by the Bush crime family in order to move a prominent Democrat like Siegelman out of the way. We had his daughter on and talked about it. Siegelman, of course, has been released. An appeals court has released him while he files his appeal, and he has or will be testifying before Congress about what happened to him. The outlet that broke the story and really went to town on it was rawstory.com, and their managing editor, Larisa Alexandrovna. And we've asked her to be on the program tonight because there is another program very similar, or another situation very similar to this, that involves not a Democrat, but a man who's a Republican. Larisa, hi, welcome to the program.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to do a real quick synopsis here. This is based on what you have written. You wrote a couple of weeks ago. Larisa conducted an interview, exclusive interview, with a former Mississippi Republican state legislator who was later backed by Democrats and wound up with a seat on the Mississippi Supreme Court. His name is Oliver Diaz Jr., and he was indicted in 2003 on charges relating to his receipt of a loan guarantee from a trial lawyer, Paul Minor, personal friend and the largest Democratic donor in Mississippi, to help defray campaign debts. A Bush-appointed U.S. attorney in Mississippi, Danica Lampton, brought charges of bribery against Diaz, Minor, and two other Mississippi judges. Diaz was acquitted of all those charges, and a jury acquitted Minor of the charges related to Diaz, but was unable to reach a verdict on some other charges. So within days of his acquittal, Diaz was indicted a second time, and he was again acquitted. Prior to being appointed to the judiciary, Diaz served in the Mississippi House of Representatives as a Republican for 7 years. He was elected to the Mississippi Court of Appeals in 1994, and in 2000 he was appointed to the state Supreme Court by then Democratic Governor Ronnie Musgrove. What emerges in the interview that Larisa conducted are allegations of even more aggressive prosecutory tactics and intimidation than was previously reported about the story. And, of course, the allegations seem to fit the pattern of the prosecution in Alabama, where another Bush-appointed U.S. attorney successfully prosecuted Don Siegelman for bribery. And as in Alabama, Diaz was indicted a second time after the first set of charges failed to hold up in court. He was ultimately acquitted and still retains the state Supreme Court seat. Now, he tells Raw Story, quote, "After I was indicted before my trial, my home was broken into, our door was kicked in, our documents were rummaged, televisions, computers, and other valuables were not taken, despite the fact that we were out of town for several days, and the home was left open by the so-called burglars. We could not figure out a motive for the burglary and reported to the Biloxi Police Department. The crime was never solved." And as Larisa previously reported in the Permanent Republican Majority Part 2 in their investigative series, Governor Siegelman's home was broken into twice during the trial, and his attorney's office was broken into at least once during the process of his case. Now, it goes on. One thing you have to keep in mind, Diaz was seen as being possibly a threat to the Republican governor of Mississippi, Haley Barbour. And, of course, Barbour was the chairman of the Republican National Committee from 1993 to 1997, and barely escaped some indictments himself, because what Barbour did all those years ago was to bring unreported money from the Chinese government into the Republican Party, which helped elect all those Democrats back in 1994. Joining us now, like I said, is Larisa Alexandrovna of rawstory.com. This story is not quite, I don't think, as bizarre as the Don Siegelman story, but what does it indicate to you, Larisa?
Well, it shows a pattern of what appears to be, initially, if you look at the Alabama situation, you have the Republican whistleblower, Dana Jill Simpson, who blows the whistle that Karl Rove was involved in Siegelman's prosecution. Her house is burnt down, and she's run off the road. Mm-hmm. As you noted, Governor Siegelman's house was broken into twice, his attorney's office once. And then when you look at Mississippi, you see a very similar pattern. One of the judges that was indicted with Judge Diaz, John Whitfield, his office was burnt down. You have break-ins again, as you noted, in the Diaz household. So first and foremost, what you see is a very disturbing pattern of crimes that are yet to be solved that appear to be targeting the people who are already targets of these investigations and prosecutions. So that's certainly one big pattern and issue that's going on between the two states.
Were you surprised to learn that these type of terror tactics, police state tactics, could be used against a man who nominally is a Republican?
No, because I've been crawling around the Deep South now for 6 months, investigating several states, and what it's becoming clear to me is that it's not Republicans, your typical Republicans or Democrats. It's a version of Republicans, like the Haley Barbers, the Karl Roves, that's extremely far right. That are targeting people of both parties. Democrats for obvious reasons, but Republicans who will not play ball, who will not fall into line. So, no, I'm not surprised at all. There's a man who was just indicted in Alabama because he wouldn't play ball. His name is John Goff, a Republican, huge Republican a fundraiser, but he wouldn't play ball, and they indicted him recently. So I'm not surprised at all. No.
Now, refresh me on this. Minor, the man who was also accused in this trial, lawyer Paul Minor.
Right.
Is he in jail now?
Yes.
All right. Now, what was he convicted of?
Well, he of not committing any crime. He was convicted of what they were. Diaz, Minor, and the two other judges were indicted for was that during the election, Diaz and Minor go way back before one was a judge and whatnot, and the political money apparatus of the Republicans, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, started flooding the state of Mississippi against Diaz in support of his more Republican opponent, and he couldn't compete. So Paul Minor basically signed a loan guarantee, which is not against the law in Mississippi. So there's no crime committed, but they were indicted anyway. And the case that was presented was one of bribery, even though there was no quid pro quo. So Diaz was acquitted twice, but the other three, Paul Minor and the other two judges, were tried again and were not acquitted. And Paul Minor now sits in prison in Pensacola, Florida. And the big issue there right now is, and similar to what happened to Don Siegelman, Paul Minor was shackled. This is, he's accused of a white-collar crime. He was shackled and manacled and moved out of state, and his wife is dying of brain cancer, and he's not allowed out to see her. He's not